I imagine that this prayer for our nation has seen our nation through many troubled times and will do so today. I've chosen as our readings, again for this Sunday, the Epiphany readings, which Rebecca Vardaman so beautifully preached on last week. But those Epiphany readings, I think, are really critical in this time. We are asked in the collect for today to be led by the star to God's presence. Even as the prophet Isaiah says in chapter 60, when darkness covers the earth and thick darkness its peoples, in that time the Lord will arise upon us and the glory will appear with us. We may feel like Paul as prisoners to this world, but like Paul, perhaps we can see that we are prisoners and servants of Christ, and that is a different way of being a prisoner. And finally today, we look at the wise men once again bringing the gifts to the baby Jesus, led by the star, and giving the gifts, very precious gifts, and laying them at the feet of the baby in the manger. And then returning to their own country by another road. I'd like to think about that last phrase in our gospel today, leaving for our country, our home, by another road. I think about how it is when we go out on a journey, perhaps in our cars, and think about getting in your car one evening as it's dusk. It's beginning to grow dark, and you decide to head west. Maybe it's a route you've traveled many times before, like many of us have come from Cumberland up to Frostburg in the evening as the sun's setting. Maybe it's west to Ohio and beyond, Nebraska, California. Maybe it's a long-awaited road trip to a place we've never gone out west before. But think about that trip and how you make that trip. You have maps that tell you which way to go. You have MapQuest. And you have signposts along the way. Signposts to lead you to something else. The poet David Whyte, who I'm spending a lot of time with, has written a poem called Star about driving in Ireland from the north of Ortoron west. And I'm going to give you a little piece of the poem to start this sermon homily. North of Ortoron, there comes a sudden lapse and steal of light in the sky, the opening of an invitation to a different way through land. Once thought familiar land. And driving on in the low western sun, the sense of a parallel looked for but not yet found. The crack between the world as you want it and the world you seem to have inherited. The evening light beginning to pale everything, and the great discipline remembering to drive that road into the disappearing gleam and not lose sight of the beckoning interior horizon. Never to pass the door to the liminal world, but to go another way. It seems as though we've been going another way, on another road, for a good long time, perhaps since March, but maybe for some of us even before. How do we stay in community, in conversation, when we're going in a way that seems to be beyond anything that we're aware of, beyond our awareness? We have so many questions beyond what we can see. When will this pandemic end? When will I get my vaccine? When will I see my children, my grandchildren, my friends, my family, my parish family once again? When will we as Emmanuel worship together in one space? Will I want, or you want, to worship in person anymore? What will become of everything that I hold dear? Time marches on. How do we stay in this unknown destination of time when we feel so out of it? It is like driving at the end of the day as darkness comes and trying to find one's way into a place we've never been before. Sometimes even returning home from a place we've been in the dark is hard. There's another way to think about going on a different road, and that's when we lose senses that help us get to a place. Poet Mark Nepo, who I've also been reading, says that when he began to lose his hearing as a result of chemotherapy, he had to rely on different intuition and instinct. He says the way we think and feel and sense our way into all we don't know is really the art of intuition. It's the art of discovery. To intuit means to look upon, to instruct from within, to understand or learn by instinct. An instinct refers to a learning we're born with. God has given us the instinct to intuit the unknown way forward. It's the very personal way we listen to the great universe in order to discover and rediscover the learnings we're born with. Intuition is a deep form of listening that, when trusted, can return us to the common, irrepressible element at the center of life and to the oneness of things that surround us and makes us resilient. So Nepo talks about how he lost his hearing, and some of us, you, have begun to lose hearing. And you know, it starts very subtly. With perhaps you're in the kitchen, you can't quite hear everything your beloved is saying in the other room. Then as you realize you're not hearing, there's the resistance to what is, to the unknown before you. I won't go get tested. I won't get a hearing aid. I'm not ready to accept this phase, this next stage of aging. And we all add to our sufferings when life changes and we still behave as if it hasn't. Whether facing the limitations of aging or shifts in our relationships or the wilting of a dream or a goal, we're often given hints of the changes before they arrive. There are stars that appear, are signs to us. It's how the angels of time try to care for us, drawing us to new resources that wait just out of view. We're always given signs and new forms of strength, and it's up to us to use them. The wise men saw the star, and the star led them to the true light. They had to trust in the sign, but not think the sign was the end. And once they did, they found a whole new way of life, which involved giving their most precious gifts away to a child in a poor manger and going home by a different road. We as individuals in these times, and we as Emmanuel community, have been given signs. I'm wondering what your sign might be in this pandemic that has begun to lead you to what is deeply important in your life. As Emmanuel community, I would say that one of our signs this past year was the wall falling and the renovation and restoration of our Washington Street wall. It made us realize how important we are to the entire Cumberland community. And it's asking us, what gifts do we bring, what precious gifts that we see as Emmanuel's gifts, how do we bring them and lay them at the feet of Cumberland and the greater community? It will involve coming home to our foundational wisdom and strength by another road. All through Epiphany, I'm going to suggest weekly practices for our 6 Sundays of Epiphany that will help us to walk that other road, that new road to the unforeseen future. And the first practice I'd ask you to engage in is gratitude. Gratitude for gifts in our individual lives, something we may have missed or been blessed with this past year. And also, I'll be engaging you into Emmanuel's gifts. For my individual gifts, some of you saw it on my husband Brian's Facebook page, that we are very grateful for mild cases of COVID while we mourn the loss of our dear friend Cecil, blessed with his life. We also give thanks for our daughter Anna and son-in-law Michael's new life in 2021, their new house and other new things coming into their lives. We give thanks for that. And we give thanks for our son and family far overseas, for their safety and their well-being, and our hope to see them in the new year at some point. We are thankful for friends and family. And as Emmanuel, as a member of Emmanuel, I am very thankful for all that has been, for all of you who have kept your pledges going and made new pledges and donations, but more importantly, for your presence, either virtually, through email, through phone calls, in person, and for all of us who have given of themselves to provide worship. For our community has deep gifts, our history, our presence on the Hill. And in the next few weeks, you'll be hearing about memorials that we will give to the community in honor of this extraordinary time. Pandemic memorials, through gardens, through books of names that we want to remember, and perhaps even having an eternal flame on our hill that reminds us that hope and light, the light of Christ, never is extinguished and comes to us in the darkness. So let us keep driving together and practicing gratitude in this first week of Epiphany. Amen.